My name is Alexis Mitchell, and for the last 8 years I've worked as a paralegal at a small law firm in Nashville. I spend my days drafting contracts, organizing evidence, and preparing other people's cases. I never imagined my own life would become the kind of case I usually filed away in someone else's folder. On the night my husband, Hunter Mitchell, took his final breath, I kissed his forehead and felt his hand grow cold in mine. We had been together for 12 years. He was the man who built tables with his own hands, who laughed even when the pain stole his sleep. When he slipped away, I thought the worst part of my life had just ended. I was wrong. As I stepped out into the hospital corridor, wiping tears from my eyes, I caught the voices of 2 nurses speaking in low tones. They weren't talking about grief or sympathy. They were talking about a secondary payout tied to Hunter's case. Something his wife, me, wasn't supposed to know about. And then I heard a name that froze my body where I stood. Cole Mercer, Hunter's best friend. The man we trusted with everything. I stood frozen by the elevator. The nurse's words echoing in my ears like a siren I couldn't shut off. They mentioned a secondary payout. Insurance redirected without the wife's knowledge. And then the name Cole Mercer, Hunter's best friend. The man who had handled every financial detail while I was drowning in hospital shifts and grief. Cole had been with Hunter since their college days. He wasn't just a friend. He was family in every way except blood. He sat at our table on Sundays, knew the layout of our apartment better than my own relatives, and was the person Hunter trusted when cancer stripped him of his strength. But in that quiet hallway, grief cracked open into something sharper, a suspicion that clawed at my chest and refused to let go. When I returned home after Hunter's death, the apartment felt smaller, darker. I opened the drawer where Hunter kept our files, the place I had always avoided because he and Cole managed everything. I spread the documents across the kitchen table and began reading with the same careful eye I used at the law firm. Page after page of insurance statements and bank summaries sat before me. At first glance, nothing looked out of place. But then I noticed its subtle payment instructions, account numbers I didn't recognize, transfers marked as routine adjustments. They were masked, well, almost invisible, but I had spent years spotting inconsistencies in contracts. The amounts were staggering. Tens of thousands shifted into accounts tied not to us, but to entities I had never seen before. My stomach twisted as I recognized the precision of it. Someone had mapped this out carefully, counting on me, never looking too closely, counting on Hunter being too sick to question, counting on trust to blind us. I sat in silence. The documents spread like evidence of betrayal. Cole's name appeared again and again. His signature co-signed on forms I never remembered Hunter discussing with me. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. The truth was sitting in black ink, underlined by every missing dollar. Cole Mercer, the man Hunter had called his brother, had been bleeding us dry while my husband wasted away. The morning after Hunter's funeral, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of papers I had pulled from every drawer in our apartment. The apartment still smelled faintly of the flowers people had dropped off, their fragrance cloying in the stale silence. My coffee went cold untouched as I traced every line of every document, searching for what my instincts already told me was there. The first real crack appeared in a statement from Hunter's life insurance policy. I noticed a change in the beneficiary section. My name was still listed, but there was an addendum, a line directing a portion of the payout to an auxiliary account for administrative allocation. It was the kind of vague phrase that looked harmless at first glance but reeked of manipulation. I checked the account number. It wasn't ours. My training at the law firm had drilled into me the importance of details. I cross-referenced the number against other documents and found it repeated in claims forms, tucked inside medical billing summaries, and even on correspondence Hunter had signed during one of his weaker days. Cole's signature appeared in the margin of 2 of those forms. My pulse quickened. Then came the file that removed all doubt. It was an email printout Hunter had kept, perhaps intending to review it later. The header listed Cole as the sender. The content was clinical, full of financial jargon. But the meaning was clear. Insurance disbursements were being temporarily redirected to secure accounts until final settlement. The words were dressed in legality, but I knew exactly what they meant. I set the paper down and stared at it until my vision blurred. This wasn't a mistake, not an oversight. It was deliberate. While Hunter lay in a hospital bed begging me to promise I'd be okay, Cole was siphoning the very funds meant to ease that burden. I gathered the most damning pages into a folder and labeled it the way I would prepare evidence for a case. But this time, the case was mine. My grief was still raw. But now it had a sharp edge. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a woman with proof. I had spent my career preparing other people's cases. But for the first time, I was drafting one of my own. The folder on my table wasn't just evidence anymore, it was ammunition. Every signature, every redirected transfer, every false addendum to Hunter's policies had become a weapon I intended to use. Grief still weighed on me, but anger had hardened it into something sharper. Cole Mercer had stolen from my dying husband. And worse, he had stolen his peace of mind. I wasn't going to the police right away. Men like Cole were skilled at spinning stories, burying trails, and calling everything a misunderstanding. If I went too soon, he would wriggle free, claim confusion, and disappear with what was left. I needed a strategy that left no escape. I began with the timeline. Cole had an investment firm on the verge of a major deal. I knew because Hunter had mentioned it, and Cole himself had bragged about it over dinner months earlier. If the payout was redirected to fund that acquisition, it would tie his theft directly to personal gain. That was the kind of connection prosecutors loved. Next, I prepared the trap. I kept my contact with Cole light, just enough to keep him confident. I let him believe I was drowning in grief, too shattered to look at paperwork, too trusting to question his guidance. Meanwhile, I built my own case the way I would at the firm, duplicating files, notarizing copies, and storing digital backups off-site. I reached out quietly to a federal contact, an acquaintance from a prior case the firm had handled, who confirmed that financial crimes of this scale required precision. "Bring us everything," he said, "and keep him close until we can move." That became my plan: stay close, play the widow who couldn't see straight, and give Cole all the rope he needed. By the time he realized the noose was tightening, it would be too late. The morning of Hunter's funeral broke gray and wet, the kind of rain that seeped into your bones. I dressed in the black dress I had worn once before, for my father's burial, and placed Hunter's wedding band on the chain around my neck. My mother, Eleanor Brennan, stood beside me, her sharp eyes steady, reminding me silently that the performance ahead required composure, not tears. The chapel was filled with faces from different corners of our lives: Hunter's co-workers from the construction site, neighbors from our building, a few colleagues from my firm, even Tony from Romano's, who had closed his restaurant for the morning. They came to honor Hunter. But for me, the funeral was not only about saying goodbye, it was the moment to reveal what Cole Mercer had done. Cole arrived early, dressed in an immaculate black suit, his expression carefully arranged into grief. He clasped my shoulders, holding them a beat too long, as if to prove his loyalty. Beside him, his wife Lauren carried tissues and murmured condolences with practiced sympathy. Watching them play their roles almost made me laugh. They thought they controlled the script. They had no idea the stage was mine. The service began with hymns Hunter had never cared for, but Cole had insisted on including. When he rose to give the eulogy, the room stilled. He spoke of brotherhood, of loyalty, of promises made in college dorm rooms and football seasons. He painted himself as Hunter's protector, his chosen family. I let him speak, every word digging his grave deeper. When the service ended, guests moved toward the reception area. Cole guided me into a side office, carrying his leather briefcase. He spread papers across the desk with smooth efficiency, sliding a pen toward me. Insurance forms, he said. Routine. Just signatures to release funds quickly. His tone was soft, reassuring. My eyes skimmed the lines, noting the altered beneficiary instructions, the familiar auxiliary account number. I let my hand hover over the pen, pretending hesitation, pretending trust. Before I could sign, the sound of footsteps filled the hallway. The office door opened, and federal agents stepped inside, led by Agent Sarah Davies. Their badges caught the light as conversations outside the office hushed. Gasps rippled through the guests gathering near the doorway. Cole Mercer, Agent Davies said, her voice clear enough for every witness to hear. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Cole's mask cracked. He stammered, reaching for his papers, insisting it was a misunderstanding. Lauren's face drained of color, her hand frozen on her phone. Around us, Hunter's friends and family watched in stunned silence as the man he had trusted most was exposed for what he truly was. The funeral had become more than a farewell. It was justice unfolding in real time. And for the first time since Hunter's death, I felt a sliver of peace. The funeral had ended, but the echoes of Cole Mercer's arrest spread faster than the rain rolling down the chapel steps. By the next morning, every news outlet in Nashville carried the story. Respected financial advisor arrested during best friend's funeral for fraud and embezzlement. Headlines called it both shocking and grotesque. The photographs Cole in handcuffs, his head bowed. His wife Lauren, pale beside him, circulated across local channels and onto national feeds within hours. But the real collapse happened behind closed doors. Cole's firm, Mercer Capital Strategies, was mid-negotiation on a $40 million acquisition that had been touted as his crowning achievement. By Friday afternoon, the deal had evaporated. Investors fled as soon as word of his arrest hit the wires. Calls poured into the office demanding audits of every client account. His partner, Daniel Walsh, issued a statement distancing himself from Cole. But it was too late. Their firm's credit lines froze. Vendors suspended services. And by Monday, the once pristine office tower where Cole kept his nameplate stood half empty. Lauren tried to shield herself with denial, insisting she had only processed routine forms. But emails revealed her digital signature on multiple transfers, her phone records tied to timing of payouts. She was no bystander. Federal agents charged her as a co-conspirator. And the same cameras that had once captured her smiling at charity galas now caught her leaving the courthouse with shackles on her ankles. The fallout spread further than their marriage or their firm. Clients they had duped came forward, families battling illnesses, widows like me, small business owners buried in debt because their supposed advisor had drained them. Each story fueled public outrage. What had seemed like an isolated betrayal now looked like a pattern of exploitation. The FBI bundled those cases into a larger investigation, widening the net beyond Cole and Lauren. Daniel Walsh, desperate to salvage his own reputation, testified that Cole had pressured him into approving questionable transfers. But even his cooperation couldn't save him entirely. The firm's collapse dragged him into bankruptcy court, and with it came years of legal battles. I watched it all unfold, not with glee, but with a steady calm. Every domino falling confirmed what I had known. The moment I found those redirected payments, Cole's empire was built on theft. And theft cannot stand forever. Hunter's name appeared in the reports too, one of many victims, but the face tied to the spectacle that finally tore Cole down. By the time the dust settled, Mercer Capital was gone. Lauren was awaiting trial, and Cole sat in a federal detention center with no way out. The man who had strutted into Hunter's hospital room carrying confidence and promises now had nothing but the weight of his own choices. 6 months after Hunter's funeral, I walked into the federal courthouse in downtown Nashville. The building was sterile, all glass and steel, humming with the energy of lawyers, reporters, and families waiting for their cases to be called. But this wasn't just another case on the docket. This was the culmination of everything Cole Mercer had stolen, not only from me, but from every family whose grief he had exploited. The courtroom was packed that morning. Reporters filled the back rows, their notepads ready. Former clients of Mercer Capital sat scattered throughout the benches, some still pale from chemo treatments, others leaning on canes, all of them there to see justice done. My mother, Eleanor, sat beside me, her hand steady on mine, the same way it had been at Hunter's funeral. When the guards brought Cole in, shackled in an orange jumpsuit, I barely recognized him. The man who had once walked into hospital rooms with polished shoes and a confident smile now shuffled forward. Thinner, shoulders slumped, hair unkempt. His wife Lauren followed, wearing the same prison uniform, her face drawn and lifeless. The courtroom buzzed with the weight of their fall. The prosecution laid out the case with clinical precision: wire fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, charge after charge, each backed by documents I had once organized in my own living room. Every transfer, every forged signature, every email string was projected onto screens for the jury to see. Cole's signature glared at us from countless pages, a testament to his arrogance. Lauren's digital approvals appeared beside them, tying her inextricably to the scheme. The victims testified. A widow described how she had sold her home to cover treatments that should have been paid by her husband's insurance. A young father told the jury he had worked 3 jobs while Lauren filed paperwork that funneled their payouts elsewhere. Each voice carved deeper into the silence of the room. By the time it was my turn, the air was thick with anger and sorrow. I stood, my knees steady despite the ache in my chest. I told the court about Hunter, about his pride in providing for me, his determination even in sickness, and his final words asking me to trust Cole. I explained how Cole's theft had forced Hunter to believe he was leaving me with nothing, how he had died, apologizing for failing me. My voice did not waver. I wanted Cole to hear every syllable. He had not just stolen money. He had stolen my husband's dignity, his peace, his final moments. Cole's defense tried to spin the story, painting him as a man overwhelmed by the complexity of the financial system, claiming his intention had been to safeguard assets for families. But the evidence was too precise, too damning. Every transfer told the truth better than words could. When Judge Patricia Hawkins delivered the verdict, her tone was sharp and unyielding. Guilty on all counts. Cole was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of early release. Lauren received 8 years. Her role deemed significant but secondary. The gavel struck, echoing through the courtroom like a final nail in the coffin of their lies. As guards led them away, Cole glanced back, searching the room for sympathy that no one offered. Lauren's tears fell, but they were the tears of someone mourning her lost lifestyle, not her crimes. I walked out of the courthouse into crisp October air, the sun shining far too brightly for what had just ended. Justice had been served, but it did not bring Hunter back. Still, for the first time since his diagnosis, I felt a piece of the weight lift from my chest. The world now knew the truth, and Cole Mercer would never betray another dying man again. After the sentencing, Silence settled over my life in a way I hadn't expected. For months, everything had been noise lawyers, agents, reporters. The endless cycle of investigation. When it ended, I found myself sitting alone in our apartment, staring at Hunter's empty chair. The check from the court-ordered restitution sat folded on the table. It was more money than we had ever seen. But to me, it carried the weight of everything we had lost. I knew I couldn't live inside that silence. Hunter had asked me in his final days to keep living, to find joy again, to build the family we dreamed of, even if it wasn't with him. At first, those words had felt impossible, cruel even. But now, they became the map I needed. I took the restitution money and the life insurance payout and created something new, the Hunter Mitchell Foundation. The mission was clear: protect families in their darkest hours. Make sure no one else was tricked the way we had been. We offered free financial reviews, legal guidance on power of attorney documents, and education for patients too vulnerable to navigate a predatory system alone. The first case we handled was a young couple in Memphis whose advisor had tried to reroute their insurance claims. We caught it in time. Their child received treatment, fully covered. Each success became a thread that stitched me back together. The grief never disappeared, but it shifted into something I could carry. When I visited Hunter's grave on the first anniversary of his death, I brought a folder of the families we had helped. 17 in total that year. I read their names aloud, letting the wind carry them. "You didn't leave me with nothing," I whispered. "You left me with a purpose." The catharsis wasn't in watching Cole rot in prison or seeing his empire collapse, though both had their place. The true release came in honoring Hunter by making sure his story didn't end in betrayal, but in protection. His name no longer sat only on a headstone. It lived in the foundation. In the center, we built out of his grandfather's farmhouse. In the quiet relief on the faces of families who learned they weren't alone. I walked away from the cemetery lighter than I had in a year. Justice had closed one chapter, but purpose had opened another. And in that purpose, Hunter's spirit lived on. Standing at Hunter's grave that afternoon, I realized the story had come full circle. Betrayal had stolen his last months. But justice had exposed the truth. Cole Mercer and Lauren were locked away, their empire reduced to rubble. The Hunter Mitchell Foundation was growing, helping families defend themselves against the same kind of fraud that nearly destroyed us. I would never stop missing Hunter. But I no longer lived with the crushing weight of what had been taken. Instead, I carried forward what he had given me: resilience, clarity, and the courage to fight. My revenge wasn't just the arrests, the trials, or the collapse of an empire. My revenge was living fully, building something stronger from the ashes, and ensuring his name would always mean protection instead of pain. Stay with us for more stories of justice, betrayal, and redemption. Subscribe today and never miss what comes next.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.